So I'd like to introduce our panelists and have them come up and take a seat, and then I'm going to kind of go through each one to give you a little bit of information about their company. So I'm going to start with Micah Hill, who is with Millhouse Development and is also the local president of the Builders Association of Greater Indianapolis. So Micah, if you want to come grab a seat. Scott Miller from the Hagerman Group, Janet Charles from Envirotech Construction Corp., and Harold Forrest from Forrest Construction Company. Hold it closer. You can't hear me. Sorry. Go ahead, grab a seat. I have a history of working in admissions, so I feel like I can project without a mic, but I'll use the mic. Now be gentle, because these folks have volunteered their time and they don't typically serve on panels with educators. So we don't want to stump them too much. So But Harold, if you don't mind starting, can you share with us a little bit about your company, who you typically hire, salaries in your industry, and anything you'd like people to know about Forrest Construction?
Certainly, thank you. Again, my name is Harold Forrest. I am a second-generation participant in Forrest Construction Company. We are an engineering and general contracting firm based in Columbus, Indiana, and we're about to begin our 70th year of continuous operations. We are involved in two complementary but somewhat different types of business. We are involved in commercial, industrial, and institutional building construction, and also heavy highway and civil construction. Both of those focuses may include public or private customers. On the civil heavy highway transportation side, it tends to be more public. NDOT, cities, counties, and so forth. We do bridges, drainage structures, site development, and so forth. We don't do asphalt work. On the building side, it tends to, we have a bias towards private projects and manufacturing plants, many of them for offshore-based companies, has become common in Indiana. And the size of projects that we undertake may go from very modest, maybe $100,000 or a couple $100,000 to projects that individually may exceed $50 million. We have an unofficial slogan in our company, and that is that outhouses begat penthouses. And what that means is many customers become familiar with you because of modest projects, maintenance work, or things that are by no means glamorous or that by themselves may look to be that important. But confidence and trust build in small ways and take you to other larger projects. In some circles, I will refer to our company as a legitimate contractor. And by that I mean we self-perform a lot of our work. We put our hands in the wood. We get dirty. And I think there's a lot of satisfaction that comes with that, and it also gives us the opportunity to provide more points of entry into the business for people of different skills and different backgrounds. We have about 300 employees currently, maybe a few more, and that will vary in part based upon the markets that we're in or the level of activity, the position of the economy at any one time. And it might be of interest for you to know that our background is in custom farm work, milk houses, grain bins, and farm ponds. Beginning in mid-1940s when Don Forrest, my dad, began the work. And that actually is part of the basis where we have 1 foot in the site civil and 1 foot in the building side of things. So I remember one of my dad's slogans was, "Don't put the milk house in the barn." And why is that important? Is because the barns used to always burn because of wet hay. And for the small farmer, not so many of them these days, but years ago, the milking system was probably the most important thing that the farmer had and the most expensive investment. So to make sure that you isolate your risks, you put the milk house in a building maybe close to the barn, but outside of it, so that when your hay catches fire and the barn burns down, you can still milk your cows the next day. So that caution in terms of what we do, I think, is still undergirding our company to this day. What is interesting about construction is that it's fun to build and build well, because if you do it, you have something that you can refer to as something you did for a long, long time. Likewise, if you do it poorly, that damage to your legacy is going to take a long time to go away. But of the folks that we have engineers, we have CPAs, we have IT computer specialists, we have carpenters, laborers, equipment operators, we have concrete finishers, we have our own materials testing lab. We really like to do work and to get our hands dirty. I would also tell you that we have an input versus output assessment of this. And if I can bore you but not take too much time doing so, to do a project successfully, the outputs are typically measured in terms of the technical, the operational success. Did you make money at the job? And did you get it done on time? So those are the outputs. If you do those kinds of things, then generally you can check the good box, the good job box. But the resources in a project on the construction side are 6 of them. Let's see if I can count them off. Labor, people with their hands and backs that do the work. Materials procurement, whatever it might be. The working capital that's involved. The machinery that's involved. The technical support, the design, whatever it might be, and we have a design company subsidiary, and the management expertise. So by calling ourselves a legitimate firm, if you have your hands on those things and control the inputs, then you have a better than average chance of getting an output that is a positive one and that will help to sustain your company. So those are the things that we try to do. We also have a slogan that we put on some of our materials, and that slogan is "Nobody builds better." Nobody builds better. And why that? Well, because it's not a boast, but we use that as a statement of determination, so that anybody that's in our company, whether they've been there 30 years or 3 days, that they remind themselves that they want to go home every night feeling like they did the best job that they could do, and that we as a company did the best job that we can do. And it's not a boast, but it's a promise that we make to ourselves and we try to keep with our customers. It's important to know that construction probably has more educational paths and points of entry than just about any other industry. There are professional degrees, engineers, architects, we employ both, CPAs, IT specialists that in many cases require an advanced degree to hold their certification. That's one way that you enter it. Certainly from a clerical technical, a business standpoint, and actually we have an IT specialist and a website specialist. He has two degrees from Vincennes University, and he's a sharp young man. Craft training and certification, apprenticeship programs, what you have a chance to see today, is so critical. And I think the validity of those programs has been threatened by some of the changes that come out of the legislature. But for the aspiring journeyman or the contractor who needs to hire them, there is no better place to prepare for a good career than in craft apprenticeship training programs and journeyman skills improvement programs. As I said, there are many points of entry, and those can also include internships, job shadowing at the high school level. We called it vocational education when I was in school, and I think we've got away from that. But the reality is, good vocations can provide good incomes and very good qualities of life. I think that some of our good workers, our journeyman carpenters, probably take less home at night than I do, and sometimes I feel a little bit jealous of them for that. There are critical values or pre-qualifications that I think are necessary for anyone wanting to work in this industry if they want to be proud of what they do. And as educators, I know that some of these are the harder parts of instilling, the harder skills to instill in somebody. But the folks that we look for, regardless of the point of entry into our business, we look for honesty. We want them to tell us the truth all the way along. And some of them may be honest naturally, but not everybody comes from that. And so they need to know that there's penalties for dishonesty. We want them to be drug-free, end of story. Doesn't mean that we can't enjoy a beer after work once in a while, but they've got to be drug-free. And they need to be not just stump the dope drug-free, but drug-free. By that I mean just passing a test. But I would tell you that most of the industry drug testing programs are as porous as a colander. And people need to know that the goal is not to pass the test. The goal is to be substance-free. Those are two different things. We want someone who is ambitious, who doesn't mind sweating or doesn't mind thinking hard, and our industry takes both. We want them to be desirous of a career in our field, regardless of how they come into it or what their particular roles might be. Call it passion. And it may be corny, but we have some career laborers that are as passionate about the work we do as I could imagine anyone being. And I think that helps drive them to do a good job. And the other thing is that those people who are passionate will not abide people who are not. So if the stars among you, the stars of your students, if they can be placed in a company that likes those kind of attitudes, they'll find that they're working with like-minded people, or they'll go somewhere where they can find like-minded people. But people who are motivated on their own because they like to do a good job, they enjoy the work, they don't abide poor work, and they won't accept failure, it doesn't make a difference. It makes no difference where they might enter into the company. I would also tell you that some of our very best project managers and our most capable people may have had a 2-year degree, may have come through the apprentice training programs, and in fact, our senior management staff all came through apprenticeship training programs and participated in skills enhancement programs. And by being a legitimate contractor, our people know just not what the results are, but they know how to achieve them. And that's what makes me particularly proud of them. Our company, we have engineering certification in 14 states, and when we go 2 or 3 states away, we find that there's a predominance of poorly trained and poorly motivated construction people who think that 1,000 hours a year is a career, and they're neither equipped mentally nor do they have the tools or the motivation to make a career in this business. I think that good people, good student subjects are interested in stability, who would like to find a place where they can make a positive difference and be involved in the long haul. That doesn't mean that you don't have upward mobility or that you don't change jobs to take care of opportunities. They have to recognize the importance of teamwork and shared success. And what we try to do is instill in our people in the field that their ability to read a set of plans and catch something that doesn't make sense or doesn't look to be constructible is every bit as important as the senior engineer who put those plans together and put the specs together in the same time. So it's a multiple safety process, a failure catching process. And when people know that they're a part of the quality assurance program in the company, even if they're just putting screws into drywall, but they realize that they're supposed to be 9 inches apart for a 1-hour wall, they'll put them 9 inches apart, or maybe 8 inches apart, which is what it ought to be. Those of us in construction, I think, like the tangibility of our work, and especially like it if it's been done well. What I have seen, changes in our company, changes in our industry, I think is positive. Our workforce at all levels has become more diverse. It's more gender diverse. It's more racially diverse. And we've become a little bit more international in Indiana, whether by way of Hispanic migration or other influences. And I think that's something to embrace. I think that to the extent our admittance into the craft programs helps to strengthen that diversity, it'll build a better country. We'll build better companies. So I guess that's kind of what we do and what we look for when we're looking for people at all levels. We have a lot of fun. We work our tails off, but I think the results are something that collectively we can take pride in. And we hope that keeps our customers coming back to us. So I don't know when the questions come open, but
we're going to let everyone go, and then we'll kind of jump into questions. So Janet, tell us a little bit about your company.
I'm going to put the microphone down because I have a tendency to talk with my hands, and if I punch both of these guys, it will just be an accident. I promise. My name is Janet Charles, and I'm the President CEO of Envirotech Construction Corp., and I am very happy to be here today to tell you about our company. So thank you for the invitation. Envirotech is a low-temperature specialty subcontractor. It's like what our tagline says, We are experts at low temp construction. So if you're like about 99% of the rest of the population, you're saying, what is low temperature construction? And I think the best way I can describe it is to tell you what kind of buildings we build. We build bakeries and breweries and dairies and large processing plants and refrigerated distribution centers and custom-built freezers and coolers. Our customers typically fall within two broad categories: the food industry and the life science sector. So you probably would recognize a lot of the names of our customers: Nestle's, Kellogg's, Kroger's, ConAgra on the food side, and then Eli Lilly on the life science pharmaceutical side. We do work in other sectors too. Last year, we built large freezer test cells for that were used to test Cummins school bus engines in really extreme temperature conditions. Kate had asked us to say some of the projects we're working on right now. We are building a new Maplehurst's new bakery in Lebanon. We are this week we're working at Eli Lilly on a chilling room, and we are also at the Indiana Packers in Delphi, Indiana on their expansion. And that project in particular, you might have read about last week, while Governor Pence was in Japan, he talked about that specific project. As I said, we're a specialty subcontractor. So what that means is that we work under, or I'd like to say with, general contractors or design build firms. But in saying that, I would also guess, as a matter of pride, to say we are typically one of the largest subcontractors on the project. We've been around for over 25 years, in part because of our location in the Midwest. If you think about us living in the heartland and with all this fertile soil, it's probably not a surprise that there are a lot of food companies here. And we also, in particularly in Indianapolis, with our distinction as the crossroads of America. You think of 70 going east and west and 65 going north and south. And of course, the large, very large presence of Eli Lilly on the pharmaceutical side. Now, Envirotech, what we do is we build what is referred to as the thermal envelope. We insulate the floors, walls, and roof so it can operate not that actually differently than your home refrigerator freezer. Now, one quick example of the scale of the buildings that we might build is we built for Nestle's a distribution center freezer that was over 6 acres in size, and when you walked in the front door, it was 30 below zero. In my business, product safety is of utmost importance. The owners of the facilities we build are typically regulated by the USDA and the FDA. And the facilities must be designed to keep the product temperature constant, and so there's no product spoilage. Also, the facilities must be built so they can be kept very, very clean, so they cannot be contaminated by salmonella or E. coli. Because of this risk, our employees at each level must have a rigorous attention to detail. One of the things that could happen if that rigorous attention for detail is not maintained is when the building is brought down to temperature, that's what we, so think of bringing it down to 30 below zero, like our Nestle's plant, the warm air outside will rush towards the cold air in the building. If that warm air can penetrate any gap in the seals or the insulation, you're going to have condensation. And that can come in the form of drippy ceilings, frost, or ice. What I like to think about is think about eating food that's been frozen, thawed, refrozen, served again. It's just terrible. It tastes terrible. So keeping the temperature constant is critically important, not just for the safety of the product, but the quality of the product. I'll just give one quick little tip. Is if I were, maybe you take home with you, is never buy a carton of ice cream that is covered with thick frost. Because more than likely there are ice crystals in that ice cream because the freezing temperature has not been maintained. Now what I want to do with my time is discuss the construction positions within our company that are skilled jobs but only require a high school education. Those positions would be our skilled craftsmen, our foremen, and our job superintendents. First, I'd like to talk about our skilled craftsmen. This position takes about 6 to 8 years of experience. The job, I would say their job is much more diverse than their friends who work at the local factory. Many like it because it's project-based, and each project has its challenges and it's different based on the design and the product that's being produced. Being a little presumptuous, I would say that they would say no day is ever the same. During the course of each project, the skills they're using changes as we're building, let's say, a 6-acre freezer warehouse. So what skills do they need? Our craftsmen usually need, our craftsmen do need a very strong spatial skill set. It's for reading blueprints and comprehending specifications. The typical craftsman, they show up actually with a natural acumen for mechanics and well-developed fine motor skills. As to the education, I would tell you most of them would admit that they were not good students. Quite on the contrary, most of them, I believe, would tell you that they had a hard time sitting still. As to how a solid high school education could better serve them, first, as a group, they could use stronger geometry skills and general science. Our buildings are basically making weather in a building. So the more they understand about earth science, the more context they have for why they do what they do. Unfortunately, even if they are academically strong in these areas, there are 2 other areas that will keep them from moving ahead. And those are general math skills and their communication skills. In algebraic terms, they need to be able to solve for X. They need to be able to logically solve problems, to critically think. To get there, that means they have to have good basic math skills. Those who do not struggle with things as basic as multiplication, division, and percentages. Second, they need to be able to communicate. They need to be able to talk to the other trades and each other professionally and with clarity. They need to know how to organize their thoughts and communicate those thoughts so someone other than themselves understand. Now, as to our foremen and our job superintendents, they too traditionally have been high school grads. But it's becoming a huge challenge with the expectation of computer technology and those special soft skills needed to be in a leadership position. Adding to the heartburn is that at the same time, many young people, there's less and less young people entering the trades and sticking. Many of the old salts are the baby boomers who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They're leaving the industry. This is the biggest challenge of the construction industry long term, is these folks. To help in this transitory time, we need young people with steeper learning curves. They need to come with more basic education. They typically have a lot to learn, and it can be a very frustrating process for everybody without a strong high school education. Some of the lack of stick-to-itness is because they don't have strong enough basic education to get through the rough patches of learning not only a new trade, but some of those special soft skills that let them rise and become leaders. For our foremen and our job superintendents, we expect computer literacies as to some basic CAD skills and Windows Office software. We expect some business sense as to economics and communication to our vendors and customers. And they also must have all the technical science and math skills of our skilled craftsmen that I previously spoke of. It's a tough and challenging job, but it also is both professionally and financially rewarding because they are, and we are, experts in low-temp construction. Thanks. And I'll take questions.
Why don't we let Scott jump in, then we'll do some questions at the end.
All right, thank you. Is this mic working?
Yeah.
Okay. Basically everything that my two predecessors said fits for us. And so I'm fairly new to the Hagerman Group, fairly new to the construction industry. But I thought I'd do three things today. My mom was a teacher, so she always said, hey, kind of keep it to three things, and then people can remember those three things. So, but I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the Hagerman Group. Second thing, I thought I'd share a little bit with you about my experience in education. And then thirdly, share with you kind of my career path to where I got, how I got here today. So the first thing, a little bit about the Hagerman Group. It's a family-owned business, founded in 1908, headquartered in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but we have an office here in Fishers. We do work all over the Midwest, and it's in its fourth generation of leadership. So Mark Hagerman's about 71, 72, and then his son Jeff is about 44, 45. Jeff spends most of his time in central Indiana. Mark spends most of his time in the northern part of the state. And they are co-chairs of the board, and then I run the business for the family, so I report to those two. Some of the industries or the areas that we specialize in: industrial, K through 12 education, colleges and universities, and then hospitals. Those are four primary areas. So some of the work that we've just done, we just finished up Tuttle Middle School, which is out in Crawfordsville. We are working at Wabash College and Valparaiso University right now on the university side. And then hospitals, we are working at Cameron Hospital up in Angola and Parkview Hospital in Fort Wayne doing some rehab work there. It's about a $50 million project that we're working on there. On the education side, so I've had the opportunity, I shared with a few people here, have had the opportunity to coach high school basketball. So it's a passion of mine, and so oftentimes I'll get into work probably at 6, 7 in the morning, and then work till 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, and then our team practices late at night, which allows me the opportunity to do that. But I had a chance to coach at a school called Bethesda Christian out in Brownsburg, and then at Tindley Charter School, and I'm now at Guerin Catholic. So I coach the girls basketball program up at Guerin Catholic. And I have an incredible passion for youth, and sometimes people get frustrated with today's youth, but I think if you have a chance to work with some of these kids, we're in good shape in the future. It's incredible, at least the kids at Guerin, and I'm sure that at other places too, but how smart they are. So our 4 seniors this year are all National Honor Society kids. And so when we go and compete, we may not be the best athletically, but we've got an opportunity to beat people with our smarts. And it's a lot of fun to work with that group of kids. My background, I went to a small school over in Ohio called Cedarville University. It's just outside of Springfield, Ohio, and I studied accounting there. I grew up on a farm, so I was a farm kid, and I never realized what Harold shared this morning. My grandfather was a dairy farmer, And I always wondered why the milk parlor wasn't inside the barn. I was like, man, this sucks in the winter when you have to go outside. It makes sense now. So my grandfather was a really smart guy, but he never shared that story with me. So I started, what brought me to Indianapolis, Cedarville's a Baptist school, about 3,500 students, and they draw kids from all over the nation. So I had a chance to interview all over the nation for an accounting job. But came to Indianapolis, and at the time, the Circle Center Mall was just being built. The zoo had just been built. They just built a couple of high-rises downtown. And I thought, this seems like a happening city and a place where I'd want to spend the rest of my life, or at least a large portion of it. The other thing, Indianapolis is a sports town. And so being a kid that grew up with athletics, this is an awesome place to be with all of the different opportunities for sports. So I started a CPA firm. At the time, it was called George S. Olive. It's now BKD. I got my CPA license there. And then I went to run so the downside of it is I hated accounting. So I left there to go run a business. It was a landscape business called Mainscape. So some of you may see their trucks around, but spent about 10 years there, and we grew that from kind of a small family-owned business and took it all over the nation, which was really fun and exciting to do that. And then in 2008, Mayor Ballard won an election, and it was kind of a surprise election. And I had gotten involved while I was at Mainscape with the Indy Chamber. I served on their board and their executive committee. And some of the people around Mayor Ballard said, hey, you probably could use a business guy to run economic development. So he and I met, and I decided to do that. So I took on that opportunity for about 3 years. And then we merged a bunch of groups together, the Indy Chamber, the Indy Partnership, Develop Indy, and several others. And I had the opportunity to run that group for another 2 years. So that was about 5 years in the nonprofit sector, and that was a good amount of time for me to be in the nonprofit sector. So I had a chance to know Jeff Hagerman through a group called Young Presidents Organization, and he reached out to me and just said, we have been through probably 4 or 5 of the toughest years in the construction industry. Would you be interested in coming in and helping us figure out where we want to take the business and what we want to do moving forward? So I did that just a little over 2 years ago and have been on their team. The things that Harold was sharing earlier, I thought were pretty incredible because the two businesses have a lot in common as it relates to the ethics side. It's something I'm really impressed by, the family and how they want to run the business with a lot of integrity. This is a business that some people can do things that have maybe some integrity issues, but the family's done a tremendous job with that. And I would say there are 3 things that we look for when we're looking to hire somebody. Number 1, are they good with relationships? In this industry, I think that's the biggest key, is having great relationships, whether it's with your workforce or in trying to win new business and keep that business long term. So relationships are a big key. Loyalty is a huge key. It's incredible to me as I go around and meet the team, or was meeting the team when I first came, how many people had been there for 30, 35 years at the same company. And so the family is incredibly loyal, and their employees are incredibly loyal back. And then the third thing that we look for is people who like to win. So they have a competitive spirit. We try to keep score in everything we do, just like sports. So we've got little scoreboards up around the office, and we keep score on a lot of the things that Harold mentioned. But we want people who want to win, who like to win. And one of the key things that I talk to people about is, did you play high school sports? Or were you involved in athletics? Or were you involved in the drama? Anything that you have to be in front of people, or that it's competitive to get a spot. So those are the 3 things. That's the company history. I did want to say thank you to each of you for the work that you're doing with education and whatever role that you're playing. It can be incredibly challenging. And then the third thing, like I said, I wanted to share my background and how I got here. Thanks for having us today.
So Micah represents more of our small firms. I wanted to give you a chance to see kind of the diversity there. So Micah, share with us your firm.
Sure. Good afternoon. Yeah, I'll just speak real quick about kind of the company I'm with now, and then I wanted to, a lot like Scott, just kind of tell you guys how I got to where I am and kind of my journey. I think it'll be tangible to maybe some questions here later today. And then also I did want to highlight a little bit about the association that I represent, two associations actually, and kind of the bigger need in construction industry and trades and the workforce there. So currently I'm a divisional vice president at Millhouse Development, and we do everything from larger apartment projects. When I say larger, just to quantify that a little bit for you, 300 to 400 residences, parking, commercial spaces, retail spaces, things like that included. That would be a large project. I personally am not involved in those. We also do condominiums and townhomes. That's what my division does specifically. It's the for sale division. And those may have a live-work component or a retail component. There may be some component like that as well. Those for-sale projects typically are a little bit larger. So compared and contrasted with Harold and Janet and Scott, different scale for sure. These are residents where people live whenever you're working on someone's home or in their home or on an apartment where they're going to live for a while. There's always just a different kind of set of just values and relationships there that bring. And then we also have a management company, which after people move into townhomes and condominiums and apartments, the management company, of course, is there to service the structures and the infrastructure that's been built there. We generally hire on my side of that business, much like you already heard, assistant superintendents, superintendents, project managers, project engineers, and then all the back office people that was also discussed earlier, from accounting to HR to some of those. I want to highlight more the construction side. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing now. I just want to highlight real quick how I got there. And it kind of goes back quite a ways, but I think, again, it's germane to the discussion, that when I was 6 or 7, I was diagnosed at the time with dyslexia, and that was over 30 years ago. So dyslexia then was not kind of what it is now. Because of that, much like Janet said, my personal experience was not enjoyable in school. I was not the best test taker. I found myself drawn to things that were tangible in nature, so calculus, no. Geometry, yes. Things like that. So that was kind of a constant push and pull in my life through school. One teacher made a big difference in high school, and that was my architecture teacher. And really, it was kind of all of it kind of came together for me in the fact that it was tangible, it was geometry, it was a challenge, there was always a problem. And then not only did you get to kind of design and build on the front end, then you could go out and actually see it physically going up and being built and very hands-on, et cetera. So after that experience, I believe my freshman year, in fact, I'm sure it was now, went out and really kind of focused on doing just the general work in the summers, like working on a framing crew, working on a masonry company, putting on roofs. Did some interior trim for a while and really kind of got my hands into it and said, if nothing else, it's a skill and I can work on my own home later, or kind of have a little bit of knowledge in that regard, and really found I enjoyed it. I also found that I didn't probably want to do something like that long term. I didn't see myself doing it 30 or 40 years down the road, but really great skills to have. And it was an interesting learning experience, being a high school kid and working with different age levels and different skill sets and different demographics. But what I decided to do is I did decide to continue on to college and pursue more of the project management route. And so went to Taylor University and got a degree in business. They didn't have a construction program. So did a business degree there and came out, but very much knowing that I wanted to be in the construction industry and something very tangible and hands-on. So after I got out of that, then I started working as an assistant project manager, and there's just kind of the way that industry goes, which we can talk a little bit about later if you guys are interested. But and then from project management, started running a small company downtown that focused on kind of niche urban revitalization. That was back in 2000. So just kind of as, like Scott mentioned, kind of as downtown was starting to blossom. It was really interesting. A lot of challenges at that time. Downtown was not what it is today, that's for sure. A lot of fun, though, too, helping create some of that. And then grew that business and then just recently left and went to Millhouse. So that's a little bit how I got to where I am. And kind of that path. And then real quickly, I want to highlight the association that I'm with, and I'm honored to serve as president of the Builders Association of Greater Indianapolis. You may hear that as referred to as BAGGY. I'm also a board member on the IBA. Those are respectively about a group of 500 people that are involved and 2,000 people that are involved here locally, and then IBA is statewide. Consistently, from an association perspective, we realize that workforce development is one of the top three. If you talk to pretty much anyone in the association, they're going to say, yeah, I put that in the top three, and it's consistently in there. It was in there 10 years ago. It's in there even more so now. You'll hear it again and again. We do offer scholarship programs, so for students that are interested in the construction industry that want 2- and 4-year degrees, definitely research. I just got a memo the other day that the IBA scholarships are open until the end of October. So people that want 2- or 4-year programs, there's scholarship assistance for that from an association perspective. And then just to really want to kind of highlight a couple of the real needs as far as trades, and I don't want to steal the thunder. I know there's some plumbers and electricians that are maybe going to speak later. But just inside of our group, inside of the association, both associations, there's a real need for plumbers, HVAC techs, electricians, carpenters, and other skilled craftsmen, such as like floor coverings and people that really have more detail work. And it's interesting. Like any business, you kind of have to start at the ground floor. And a lot of the people that you talk to will say, I'd prefer no experience over some experience. That way I can teach them the way I want to. So when you're talking with students and people that maybe are interested in the industry, having no experience in that is not necessarily a bad thing at all. Both from a skilled set and from what I look for specifically for my division, I always hire attitude over aptitude. You can't teach the former, you can always teach the latter. So having someone with the correct kind of attitude, and heard from all three, about people that are honest, or people that like to win, or people that have attention to detail, those types of things are really important to us. But coming into the industry, a lot of people just first getting jobs can expect around $12 to $14 to $16 an hour. There's a limited range in benefits there. That's entry level. But after just a couple years and really working hard and working your way up in there are plumbers and HVAC technicians that work for both the companies that I hire consistently that are making well into 6 figures. So it's not, I think a lot of times people have kind of an idea of what skilled tradespeople make, and kind of putting on a tool belt and going home and driving a beat up pickup truck, and you certainly can do that, but there's certainly other ways to do it as well. So when you're talking with students and people that are interested in that, I think they have to understand that like any job, you do come in at a lower level, but there is really good opportunity there for people that have high school educations or just a couple years in college. And then the other thing I just want to highlight on real quickly is that I think a lot of times construction is seen as cyclical as well, which we all know there is some aspect of that as well. And we all are in building industries and, big projects out of the ground, dirt up. But you've also heard about some of the service side and about Harold, how he was talking about there's the outhouse projects. I thought was an interesting analogy, and things like that. And so when the economy when construction spending does tick backwards, that's really the focus shifts there pretty quickly. So a plumber, right now, yeah, he might be running plumbing on one of our 300 or 400 unit apartment projects, but when those apartment projects dry up or something else, there's always a place. We all have homes. We all live in apartments or townhomes or condos or single family or whatever. There's almost always a place for these people when they've learned the skill, somewhere to fall back on. And it may be a little bit different. It may be something, I think we all probably did things in the last 4 to 5 years we didn't necessarily love at times. But you have that fixed skill, that's something that someone can't take from you. And that's a real value and asset. I'd make sure to talk with your people about that as well. That's it.
Well, Micah, you actually led right into a question that I was going to ask you all. We've been doing these events all over the state. They haven't always focused on construction. Sometimes they focus on advanced manufacturing. But something we've heard from people that work with kids is it's hard to get parents to buy in to sending their students, the construction route or the factory route because they worry that it's not a secure future, that there will be layoffs. They sort of believe that college will give their children more prosperity long term. What would you advise the people in our audience today? How can they have those conversations with parents and students to help them understand, the long term that exists? And I think you touched on a lot of it with you give them a skill, but I just wonder if any of the other panelists have some comments to that. Sorry, I said to be easy on you, and then I gave you a hard question as the first one. I'm sorry.
I'll start, and then these guys can definitely fill in. So as I've had a chance to work with high school kids and high school athletes, not all of them are going to go to college. The ones I've got right now just happen to be in that skill set. But there are great opportunities for kids and young people who don't see college as an option or may not even want to go to college. And so I think sometimes, just like we have to do with sports, so parents, for me, are the hardest part about coaching. And I'm sure for you as educators, parents are the toughest things that you have to deal with. And it's a reality factor. So at Guerin, a lot of wealth, and sometimes they think their kids are all going to go play Division I athletics. And some of these kids will have a tough time stepping on the floor for us, and we're not very good. So it's kind of the same thing can probably be said whenever you think about kids who their parents may say, hey, college is the only option. There are great opportunities out there, and as Micah said, and Janet and Harold, people can make $60, $70, $80, $100,000 with some of the different certifications that you can get, and it's hard work, and it does take a different skill set. So it's not like these people can't continue to learn throughout life. It's just a different path of learning. And so that would be my thing, but I think you do have to get in and work with parents and build a relationship with the parents in order to be able to describe that to them.
I will take a swing at this, and the best analogy I have is from my wife of 42 years, who's brought a lot of focus and vision into my existence. And she sums it up very simply, and that is that you have to have a marketable skill. And I don't think having a marketable skill is defined by 2 years or 4 years or 10 years of college, but rather by having a skill set and the ambition to go with it that is more likely than not to keep you employed. An example within my family is my older daughter went to a very well-respected Indiana 4-year college. And it wasn't inexpensive to send her there. And after her sophomore year, my wife said, Kathy, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go back in my junior year, and I'm going to do my winter term in Nicaragua and so forth. And Kathy says, fine, or Debbie says, fine, but what's your marketable skill? And Kathy says, I'm going to get a degree in biology. And my wife says, that's not what I meant. What's your marketable skill? And so she looked at her mother and said, what should it be? And Debbie says, well, I think you should come out of the university with a teaching certificate, because that's a marketable skill. You can be a teacher. And how visionary that was, because 2 years later, my daughter married a Purdue ME co-op student who had his 5th year to complete on the West Lafayette campus. And so my daughter got a job as a 6th grade science teacher at Tecumseh Middle School, provided milk and egg money and benefits. And quite honestly, had she not had the marketable skill, she probably would have been bussing tables, which is a skill. But I think having a marketable skill means that you can come out of high school or a trades program with a skill that is likely to be in demand, notwithstanding the cycles that occur in the economy. So having a marketable skill doesn't mean you have to have a 4-year degree. In some specific industries, it might. But I think it's more important to have a skill that you can identify and that you can use to be attractive to an employer.
I'm going to walk around and use the mic this time because I know we didn't catch all the questions last time. Does anyone have a question for our panel? Come behind you, excuse me.
Hi. What type of high school opportunities do you offer for high school students to get involved with your company? Or, I mean, we're always trying, part of it for us is selling them on it. So seeing it and being able to be involved. And I know lots of internships happen in college, but as far as like you mentioned job shadowing or summer jobs, do you offer anything?
What, unfortunately, we don't. Especially, I mean, we do have internships at the college level. The jobs that I was speaking of before, they are at big food companies, or pharmaceutical companies. For us to get onto their facility, so it doesn't lend itself. But I mean, I do think that things like this are very important in having them be able to talk to people. I think it would be better if we actually came to the high school and got the message out.
So may they contact you to come talk to their high school? Sorry to interrupt you, Micah.
Well, we are in Indianapolis. I don't know where the rest are. And, I do think that for especially our manager level, this is a good way for them to get public speaking skills, their own communication skills. So yes, we would be open to that.
Micah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you're correct that most internships do happen in college, and specifically with Millhouse, that's the program we have set up as well. With the association, however, again, here, especially here locally, we have a lot of HVAC, plumbing, electrical. I mean, to go back to kind of my path and where I was, my first week on a carpentry company, it wasn't glamorous. I carried around 2x4s, and then they eventually let me cut the 2x4s, and then eventually I actually got it, have one of the nail guns and nail stuff up. That was a big day in my life back then. It's like I finally arrived. But anyway, so you're right. It is a little more difficult. It is a little more grassroots. I think the association might be a good resource for you there, just because summertime is a peak in construction, and those type of just a lot of times the labor jobs, specifically in construction too, can be fairly unstable with the general workforce that's out there. So college or high school kids in the summer months is sometimes a good supplement for some of those companies.
I heard Algebra 1, I heard Geometry, and I think I heard Earth and Space Science. Collectively, do all of you think those are critical? Are there any other high school courses that you're just saying kids have to have these to be successful and be hireable?
Well, I did say the earth science and the geometry and the algebra. But one of the things I really think is, even if you push the timeline back further, they need to come to high school with some skills so they actually excel at those classes. So, but as far as other specific classes, I'll let these guys.
Our most capable people typically come through the carpenter's apprenticeship programs because there's math, there's hands-on, there's a lot of geometry, and there's management type classes that are involved. So we find that the people that come out of that program know how to get to where we want to be. In other words, how to do the work in a way that's effective, accurate, and to get the end result. You can almost drive by a job site and pick out the portions of the job, or pick out a job site where the supervision and many of the tradespeople don't have those basic skills. You can almost see it at 60 miles an hour. But good apprenticeship programs are hard to beat because of it brings all those high school type science classes and math classes together, and at an applied level, it's very helpful to our business.
Other questions? I feel like Phil Donahue.
There's a handful of us that work with a population that not only struggled in school, but may have had some legal missteps some point in their life. So what, as far as background checks, your willingness to give second chances to those that may not have the best legal backgrounds? Where do you have any particular, non-negotiable policies in your industry or in your specific companies?
So for us, So this is my personal thing. I've made some big mistakes in life. And probably if you held the mirror up to anybody in here and really got into their life, you'd probably say, man, I've made some bad mistakes. So to the extent that we can, we are a company that gives second chances. We work with people who get tested positively for drugs even within our company. But what we have to do is also keep our clients safe. And so we may have to move them to a role or a position until there is some proof or some history that, hey, we've worked through that issue and they're on to the other side of it. So I think it's on a case-by-case basis for us, and we have to kind of look at the person and spend some time with them and build that relationship with them to find out what exactly they want to do moving forward and if they're willing to make some changes.
Yes.
My question is kind of about trying to get more women into some of the trades that we're talking about. And from my own experience, I was in manufacturing first 9 years, had an education degree, and when I had to leave manufacturing, it was when my kids went to school because I could no longer juggle that manufacturing. But the companies that you all have, are they, and again, I don't want to insinuate that one parent, but just even if the students we saw out there, most of them are male, and are your positions, are they 10-hour shifts, are they 12-hour shifts, are they how do those things, kind of the work and life quality kind of things?
For our company, because our workforce comes from different areas in Indiana, because it's very specialized, so we're not all Indianapolis based. What we do to accommodate that is we try to work 4 10s, so they get their 40 hours by the end of Thursday. Now, if we can, and on these big jobs, they usually are okay with this, we might even work 12 hours Monday, Tuesday, so Thursday is a very short day, so they really have 3.5 days to get back. That's one way that we try to improve their family life.
It's difficult to job share in the field on a construction site. It's very difficult because typically you'll have a crew working, and if someone is not available for that crew, it's a problem. And sometimes weather interruptions can drive you to a mandatory Saturday or overtime work that you can't do anything about. But on the clerical, administrative, and project management side, we have had employees who have had to change to a reduced job routine during the day because of children. And we have done our best to try to either allow some work at home or to allow them to change their work schedule to accommodate that. So I think many employers are a lot more flexible about that today than they might have been 10 years ago. But on a job site field crew, it's difficult, if not impossible, to job share or to not keep the crew together for whatever the job site workday requires.
So, do you have a question, Rob?
Could I follow up on
Sure.
that question? Because,
Sorry.
Scott and I actually share something in common that we didn't know. We both started in public accounting. I was at Price Waterhouse. I practiced law at Baker & Daniels at the time, now Fairgrave Baker & Daniels. And then now I run a construction firm. And when I was growing up in my earlier careers, women were offered, it was just the beginning of offering women to go part-time with children. But I feel like that's one of the assets of my company is I practice law at the highest level and I did it part-time. So I don't have any myths around what you can accomplish within a more focused amount of time. And so, but one thing I know from that experience, it takes two. It takes the employer and the employee to be totally committed to it. And they both have to want to make it work. And they have to show up every day. When they show up, they have to show up and get that done.
I would think those in the room here, between 85 and 90% of the students or individuals we represent would make quality employees. But one of the difficulties we have in the public education side is image. And so how would you suggest, in representing the industry, not necessarily your individual entities, that industry and education could partner to correct the image of the wife beater, the unsafe working environment, the seasonal work? I think it's clear that the opportunity to make upper 5 and lower 6-figure incomes is well within the reach. But when we go to try to tell our parents, or they're sitting around the 4th of July picnic, we don't really see a lot of them celebrating, yes, my daughter's going to be an electrician. We're going to go to IU or Purdue or wherever. So how would you suggest, or how could you suggest both to your colleagues and to your educators, that we partner to have an image of the industry that's desirable to moms, not the student, but to moms and dads, because that's a big partner that we have in education that allows us to move those students into the internships, into the partnerships, into the 2-year degree or the apprenticeship programs.
You stumped them, Bob.
So, do you guys have, so at your school or in at least the areas that you participate in, do you have events where parents and children come together to learn about opportunities?
In about 2 weeks, we'll have probably 800 students that show up and parents, and we've got 65 industry. We'll have demonstration of heavy equipment to universities, to beautician schools. We try to do that.
Yeah.
But that's, again, education trying to say to parents. And so, yes, we do. To answer that, and I speak, I think, representative of almost every school district in our region here, or in the donut counties and Marion County.
My reason for asking that, if Janet or Micah or Harold was able to come and speak at something like that, or at least be a part of it, I think you then begin to see, hey, this is an industry that has really top-notch people. And sorry, if Michelle's in here, top-notch, so see that in there. So, but they have top-notch people in this industry that that can make a difference in the world. And I think that's what most parents want, is, will my kid make a difference, and will they be better off than I was? I mean, that's kind of the American dream, is, can my kid do better than I could? And I think you've got that opportunity in construction.
Well, we want to, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to say one thing, and this might not even be relevant to answering your question, but I have 5 brothers, and they, some of them are engineers, but most, so I always ask in every interview that I'm involved in one question. I say, what did you build as a kid? And a lot of them, I'm not kidding, all they can come up with is Legos and Lincoln Logs. I'm like, what about tree houses? And I have decided to actually develop the question a bit, to also say, okay, well, thinking back now on my 5 brothers, what did you take apart? And, because, we had to hide stuff from them, so they wouldn't take it apart. And what I think is some of it is also onto the parents, is I think they're so enamored with what their computer skills that their son or daughter are getting, they're forgetting that that kids need to be able to build. I mean, I have practiced as a CPA, as a lawyer, and I'll tell you, my very favorite thing is building. And so I don't think we should be defensive about it. I think we should be on the offense about it.
Well, I want to take a minute to thank our panelists. You guys were excellent. We really appreciate you coming.